Hi, it's Jack and Marcy.
Or Marcy and Jack.
Marcy and Jack.
Let me go first.
Okay.
You know,
What are we
Marcy,
going to talk about today?
this is a request. I think it's a great request.
Okay.
Someone posted the other day if we can make a video on what's the difference between a residential broker and a
Okay.
commercial broker. I thought that was a fantastic. I forget the person's name who did it, and I apologize, but that was a great
It's
request.
actually a great question.
Good question.
I mean, good thing to discuss because there are several differences. What's the first one that comes to your mind, Jack?
Well, I actually made a list because
We need lists lately.
yeah, no, usually I don't, but you know, this one I wanted to make sure. So the big thing is licensing.
Right.
Residential, to my knowledge, you need a license everywhere to do a loan.
You have to be a licensed mortgage broker, whichever state you're in residential to do a loan. You are correct.
That's
but
correct.
commercial, that's not the case.
Commercial, again, we're not experts, we're not lawyers, we know nothing. Assume we know nothing. Don't sue us, we know nothing. But in the commercial world, I think there's about 42 states that we believe you don't need a license in. So that's a big thing. Now,
Right.
it's a big thing, I think, in two areas. One is, let's say a guy is licensed in Pennsylvania to do residential.
Right.
He can't do deals in
Florida.
He
No.
needs a separate license. So
Absolutely.
it's a big thing in the fact that you don't need to be licensed. You don't have to go through the rigmarole.
No.
Plus, you can do things on almost a national.
Right, which for commercial, because you do not need to be licensed in like approximately 42 states, and again, we're not an expert in that, but we're going to just throw that number out there. You can do deals in all those different states you don't have to have a license.
And you can advertise on the internet.
Right.
You know, if you put up a website, if you're doing residential, and let's say you're in New Jersey or Tennessee, wherever you are, you put up a website. You know, it doesn't help you all over the place.
No.
When you're in commercial. It just gives you a much broader.
Right, you have so many ways of making a deal.
So licensing is a big thing.
Absolutely.
The next thing, and again, I know order of points that I wrote down, is residential is usually matrix driven. Usually, it tells you really.
Well, it's broken down, like whatever the rate is how many points you're making.
Yes.
And you know, then you can get to
And it
par.
goes by
where-
FICO scores and
Absolutely, and then there's ratios, there's guidelines, there's
so
many
everything's
more
sort of
guidelines.
predefined
Right.
based on a matrix. In the commercial world, it's really risk reward. There's no real matrix. Some companies have matrix, I know they do, but really, to be candid with you, they're mostly for sales, and an underwriter will
Yeah.
blow through them. The commercial space, it's much more of a negotiated item. In other words, you could bring us the same deal, and if the loan amount is $100,000 or $1 million, we're going to price the difference.
Right.
And we're going to price, if you bring us the same property, but the borrower, one has real good credit and one doesn't have good credit, it's going to be priced differently. So it's not, it's really.
We're not credit driven, but we do look at credit to decide what kind of rate. The higher the risk, the higher rate you're going to get. So, you know, when we strictly look at commercial lenders, looks at the collateral.
That's another one.
Yeah.
Didn't make my list, but I'm glad you brought it up. At Gelt Financial, we are collateral based. So residential, I believe they put 98% of the focus on the individuals.
On the borrower
The individual,
versus the real
property,
estate,
and the property
yeah.
gets 2 or 3%. In the commercial world, at least in our space at Gelt Financial, check us out at geltfinancial.com. Oh, by the way, like the YouTube, leave comments, questions, and ideas.
Shameless.
No shame. But in the commercial world, we put 95% of the decision based on the property and not the individual. So,
Well, because we look at the property, I mean, on residential, you're going to look at the borrower to see what kind of jobs they have, what kind of income they
how
have.
long with their job?
How
if
long
they
with
were
their job.
30
So,
days later in a Sears
right.
bill.
They're going to look at all that and they're going to evaluate whether that borrower can afford to buy that house. Okay, but in commercial, we're going to look at the property to see if the property can make the payment to the commercial lender. So we look at the property, if that property is going to make enough money to make our payment.
Big difference.
Yeah.
One, you're looking at the individual. Two, the other one, you're looking at the property.
Correct.
Okay, let's keep going. We're probably missing some.
I don't know.
But specialization. You know, in the residential field, you're right, you can specialize in FHA,
yeah,
VA, conventional,
you can, right.
or
developments, certain
non-QLM.
developments that you want to like specialize in. You know, if you're doing single-family homes or construction or
But it's
condos,
still ultimately residential.
it's all residential. Someone lives there.
In the commercial world, we work with mortgage brokers who specialize in a product, like they specialize in hotels or gas stations
Mobile
or
home parks,
mobile home parks,
mixed-use properties,
self-storage.
Strips, shopping centers, apartment complexes, hotels. So there's so many different types of properties that you can specialize in.
By the way, both of us came from a residential background, as well as I think just about everyone in the office came from a residential background, just as a sidebar. You brought up something that I didn't even think about, but I think it's worth talking about, that you think commercial deals are less work for a
broker.
They
are. For a residential, it's so, as a mortgage broker residential, you're doing so much work because you are gathering so much paperwork and documentation with the borrower, taking him through the whole process. We are on commercial, you basically bring the deal to the lender, and the lender does all the work and gathers all the documents from the borrower and basically takes the loan to closing, and then the broker gets their commission check at settlement. So it's completely different. It's a much cleaner process
as a commercial.
And through us, because we do everything direct.
We do all the work. Yeah. You know what else is interesting? I didn't think about it just till now, but I added it. In the residential world, it's basically almost all the loans are being sold to the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, or FHA or VA.
Yeah, they're not direct lenders. They're lending you the money, and then your loan is being sold.
And it's a commodity. So if you're a loan officer, really you're competing with everyone else over an eighth of a point, a quarter of a point. It's such thin margins. What sets you apart from their competitors? And it's very difficult to come up with that. And it takes.
I guess the only thing that comes to my mind is service.
But everyone says they have good service. And when my service sucks. Everyone says my service is great.
Absolutely.
But when you're a residential starting out, you have to it takes a long time to make inroads to realtors and referral bases. And in the commercial world, we're not really a commodity, and it's not as much tightly priced. In other words, you're not fighting over 1/8% or 1/4% on our deals. It's more, can we do the deal or can't we do the deal, or how do we structure?
And it's actually a fast move. Like, we're either in on the deal or we're out. I mean, there's not any discussion over it one way or another. It's decided right away. And then with residential, most time, all the time, you have to wait for the appraisal. You have to wait sure they qualify. There's a whole process, and there's definitely a percentage of those deals that don't go forward, for one reason or another. But with commercial, your product up front because you know the property.
Yep.
So.
100%. What else do we miss? What other differences are there?
What other difference?
Well, on commercial, let me back up. You get to work with us.
Yes.
You get to work with Gelt Financial.
And what I found so astonishing about being in the commercial industry, I love looking at properties all over the United States. It's kind of interesting because every single state is like its own little country, and just looking at different real estate and different ways towns are, developed, and the looks of everything, it's very interesting. It really is.
I agree. I think commercial is more interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Do we do a good job laying out the difference between commercial?
I think that's it.
So I think we did a decent job of laying out the difference between commercial and residential. I'm sure there's more. You can tell us, and we'll.
And full disclosure, not everything we always say is completely 100% accurate, but we'll try our best.
That's correct. We're winging a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Having said that, I got to give a little shameless plug on Gelt.
Okay.
I already said like our YouTube, like the channel, click the bell or the button. You'll be notified when we post more. Leave comments, questions, forward, whatever. We read them and we'll answer them.
Yeah.
But Gelt Financial is a direct portfolio lender. When we close a loan, we keep it in our books. In fact, Marcy's been working this morning on portfolio management.
Yes.
That's the reality.
Our whole portfolio.
Yeah. So you're going to stay with us. You're always going to speak to a decision maker. I can't speak correct today. You're going to speak to a decision maker. We've been closing deals, commercial deals. We closed a deal last week. It closed on the 4 business days, but we could close it on 3. The package was there on 3. 3 business days, very quick closings. Most of the time, no appraisals. We focus on property more than the individual. We look at the individual, of course, but we're focused on the property. doing all kinds of weird deals. Rush closings. Most of what we do, frankly, are they get to the closing or they get to a week before closing with a bank or with another lender who says they're a lender and
really
says
not.
they're not a broker. They drop the ball, or they come back and say, oh, they baited and switched them. Oh, you were 30 days later on a Sears bill in 1922. So now the rate is, we promised you 7%, but now it's whatever. What else?
Yeah,
A lot of mixed-use properties,
a lot of mixed
foreclosure
use.
buyouts, bankruptcies, just deals that need to close quick.
Yeah.
What else did we miss? Any other
That's
shameless
really
plugs?
it. No shameless plugs. I mean, bottom line is like if you're out there, mortgage brokers, commercial, and you have a deal that fell out at another lender, those are the deals that we really excel in.
Okay,
So,
check us out at Gelt Financial, Gelt, financial.com, and anything else?
that's it.
Most important, have a fantastic day. Take care.
Bye.